Chris, we also have some questions about the Healthcare Workforce Resilience Act. Any updates on that?
We continue to see the list of co-sponsors grow at a very impressive rate. We are up to 31 or 32 sponsors. We added another 6, I believe, this week.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting. The other piece that's exciting is that it was, again, a mix of Republicans and Democrats. It was 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So that was very good. That's on the Senate side. On the House side, I'm looking right now who's been announced. So we are announced at 45. I happen to know that, which includes just in the last 2 weeks, another, let's see, almost 10. And then I am also aware that there are several more on the House side that just have not yet been announced. So we will likely trip at or close to 50 here by next week. And those are just great numbers. We continue to work very hard. I think that this bill is already now one of the most popular ones in the House and the Senate. Having said that, until we get it passed, it's nothing. And we are probably only about 6 weeks left in the substance of this legislative term, because the U.S. legislature, the Congress, will stop around August 1st. And I know there's a very concerted effort in the Senate to produce a new COVID relief bill. There's a number of industries and people in the United States who continue to be greatly affected by this terrible disease. And so, the strategy remains. I think that this bill's most likely path to success is over these next 6 weeks and to be attached to the COVID bill, as we talked about, Tanya, at the last session. That's not the only approach. We do have some backup strategies, but I think that is the most likely approach. So that's probably the news then from this bill. And then you layer onto it some of the things that Carl said about Charlie Oppenheim, suggesting that worldwide EB3 should be current, and the Philippines EB3 will almost surely accelerate. I don't know if it's going to be current, but I think, Carl, it wouldn't surprise me if that date gets into 2019 and even into 2020 come October. So that would be great news for the Filipinos.
Well, thank you.
What Charlie said, is that the family cases, they can switch back and forth year by year between family and employment. And apparently this year there's like 25,000 more family cases, and they'll switch back on October 1st to the employment cases. And employment's 140,000 in a whole year, so to have 25,000 added to that is really pretty big. I've never heard of that many cases being switched over to employment.
Yeah, that would be, just to put that in perspective, I think there was like less than 10,000 which switched over this year, for instance. So yeah, if we get a number like what Carl's saying, it would be remarkable.
Wow. Really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of encouraging news. I think for a lot of people watching, it's been a really difficult time, a very dark time that, with COVID, so many nurses are feeling so stressed and so overwhelmed and depleted, really emotionally and physically depleted and drained right now, that I'm just so happy that we're able to share some hope, some light at the end of the tunnel, which is really very, very encouraging and really great to see the growth from the senators and from the House representatives, Chris, because I know that you personally have been working very hard on this. As you know, at Kinetics USA, we've been working very hard behind the scenes, educating our clients. Carl has been really, but I think just for everybody to know, everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction, trying to educate healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, surgery centers across the US about the importance of this bill and getting reinforcements into the US. So I think really exciting news and very encouraging.
And Tanya, there's even one more part that I thought
Yes.
maybe we'd just spend a minute with, which is,
Sure.
I know that a lot of the Philippine nurse community in 2018 and 2019, they saw a higher I-140 denial rate than really we'd ever seen. And then in late 19 and really early 2021, we saw all these 221G denials and delays at the embassy. And the reality is a lot of that is being driven by the Trump administration, and that's all bad news. The good news is in the last 3 or 4 months, the attorney community has begun really litigating these issues on a very broad theory, essentially saying that the Trump administration is overstepping what they're legally allowed to do in these types of denials. And you know, we haven't litigated, for instance, the 221G situation yet. But this week we saw something called DACA. The Trump administration essentially tried to overturn DACA, and there may be some DACA nurses who are listening in on this call. And just very briefly, DACA are adults in the United States who came to the United States as children. And back during the middle of the Obama administration, President Obama essentially said that these folks who came in when they were underage, but who are now adults, in a broad sense, could be legalized in the U.S. They weren't on a path to citizenship or anything like that, but at least they could gain a legal status, which, among other things, gives them a working status, which was, you know, a great benefit to all these folks. And the Trump administration tried to tear that down about 2 or 3 years ago. And just the other day, the U.S. Supreme Court told the Trump administration that they couldn't do that because they weren't following existing law. Likewise, there's been a number of cases that haven't had to get to the Supreme Court, but federal judge after federal judge in March and April, similar to some of the problems that the Philippine nurses and other nurses have been having on the H-1B side, of which there are many med techs and physical and occupational therapists and speech language pathologists, et cetera, who may be listening in. And a lot of those H-1s over the last several years have really had denial rates that shouldn't have been there, and the decisions were erratic and contrary to law. And just over the last 2 or 3 months, we've seen a number of federal court cases, and at the highest level, other than the U.S. Supreme Court, which is something called the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court, have time and time again been saying that these cases have taken a while to work their way through, but they are now time and time again, almost every one of these cases is essentially saying that these decisions by the Trump administration were wrong. And so just this week, Carl and I saw an H-1 memo come out from the USCIS, which rescinded two very over-the-top H-1B memos. And so we should see higher approval rates in the H-1B side. And I know on the I-140 side, we have in the last few months seen the I-140 approval rates go back to normal, which is to say almost every I-140 gets approved. And I know that has been in large part through some of these litigation efforts that haven't had to necessarily even get to court, because we've been able to say to the Trump administration, look, if you want, we'll go to court and you'll lose again, or we can try and do this amicably. And, you know, again, we've seen out of both the Texas and in particular lately the Nebraska Service Center, big change on the approval rates there, and a much better situation and less inconsistent denials. So, you know, I think the big picture here, Tanya, is, you know, both the visa bulletin is beginning to look very positive, and as Carl says and Charlie Oppenheim says, and I agree with with both of those folks, you know, I think into fiscal year 2021, all points are that the visa bulletin is going to be very favorable. I think the HWRA has a very realistic chance of getting approved. That doesn't mean it's going to be approved, but that also would be terrific news for everybody who's listening in. And then all the H-1s and all the I-140s, we're seeing much higher approval rates there. And, you know, and then the 221G, as we talked last time, Tanya, I think we're going to start to see a lot of those problems go away. So it's not perfect, but there has been a lot of positive news. And I could go on, but I know we're running late. It's already 11 o'clock here.
Oh, we love it, Chris. You can keep going. We love it. It's good
Yeah.
news.
A lot of good news. A lot of good news.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important for everybody to keep in the loop of what's happening in the bigger picture. And they're really, I think for those of us who've been doing this for a long time, Chris and I have been doing it for a long time. Carl, you've been doing it for even longer. You are the senior, and we bow and respect you. But I think that we definitely can all feel a difference.